There is a Jim Holmes of Aurora, Colorado page on the Colorado Tea Party site as well, talking about him joining the Tea Party last year. Now, we don't know if this is the same Jim Holmes, but it's Jim Holmes of Aurora, Colorado. We don't know much about him. An earlier report that I had was incorrect, that he was connected with the Tea Party. In fact, that's a different Jim Holmes. He is not connected to the Tea Party. And what we do know about him is that he's a 24-year-old white male who went to Colorado for a PhD.
This morning, we woke up to news of a tragedy that reminds us of all the ways that we are united as one American family.
Well, there's nothing that you could say about this that hasn't been said except, who do you most blame for this tragedy? Does this shake your faith in God? I mean, what if you're a parent of one of those children and you're a Bible-believing individual? Does this shake your faith, or do you think this is God's hand? Also, the question is, what medication was the shooter on? I say that because, to me, it's a similar thing to the Columbine shootings. And if you remember, right after the Columbine tragedy, I went on the air and I said, what medications are they on? They hid it for months. And then after months and months and months, I found out that the Columbine shooters were on antidepressants. We have an epidemic in America of antidepressant use, and there is often violence associated with the use of antidepressants, which is often not disclosed, possibly never disclosed to people taking antidepressants. That doesn't mean that everyone taking antidepressants is going to become a shooter. I mean, you could just as well blame him drinking milk if you wish to do that. However, who do you most blame for this tragedy? Should Warner Brothers pull the film? Do you believe the sewer pipe of Hollywood is partly responsible? Do you believe that Ratzenberg, and Spielberg are responsible for this? Do you believe that there should be some kind of self-censorship by Ratzenberg, and Spielberg? How could you not ask yourself if the violence in this film had anything to do with this jerk, this crazy killer? Because he said he was acting out the Joker from the film. He dyed his hair like the Joker in the film. He wore certain body pieces, or costume pieces that matched the film. He said it. The killer himself, Aurora Dark Knight suspect James Holmes, said he was the Joker. Say the cops. He says he was the Joker. And he went to the movie theater, loaded with the guns, certainly. You can start in with the gun blaming if you wish, but I'm certainly not going to let that occur because it's not about the guns, it's about the shooter. He dyed his hair like the Joker, and the Joker is a well-known villain in the fictional Batman universe. The attack took place at a screening of The Dark Knight Rises, the final movie in the Batman trilogy. And the fact of the matter is, he played the villain. And so I ask you, Ratzenberg, and Vatzenberg, are they responsible? They put out one violent movie after another. They have no consciousness as to what people think about such movies and their effects upon people, nor do they care. To me, it's like selling drugs. To me, the Hollywood moguls are like drug dealers. But instead of peddling crack, what they're peddling is violence and pornography. Now, there was a time that there was a Movie Association of America, whatever it was. Jack Valenti was the head of it. But before that, there was J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover was a tough guy, and the movie moguls at the time were afraid of him. And the movie moguls would not put out movies that glorified violence. In fact, as I was a kid, my father told me, he said, you'll notice, I remember this, my father said, notice that every time there's a gangster in every movie, in the end he dies. He doesn't get away with it. I said, why is that, Dad? He said, because the movie studios made J. Edgar Hoover understand that they would comply with his desire to not show that crime pays. In fact, the opposite is true. They will show in every movie that crime does not pay. I said, well, that makes sense. That as a kid, even I understood it made sense. Now reverse it. Now, after the 60s, Ratzenberg, and Spielberg have made every movie without exception show that crime, in fact, does pay, that leading a straight life is for rubes, and that only perversion and crime pay in this society. So now you see the piper has to be paid. That's one man's opinion. But who do you blame? I know you're not going to blame Ratzenberg, and Spielberg. I understand that. How about God? Does this weaken your faith in God? I don't see how it can strengthen your faith in God. One guy's calling and saying that it strengthens his faith in God, but it certainly shakes a person's view of religion. How could a just God let this happen? How could a just God let the Holocaust happen? How could a just God let a school bus go off a cliff with 16 children who came from a Christian camp? Well, I have an answer to that, or I wouldn't have any faith in God at all. And the way I've dealt with it is the way I've told you about it on the show. And I read it a long time ago when I had questions like this. See if it works for you. God is not omnipotent. God is omnipresent. God observes. God does not move the hand of everything that occurs on the earth. Every movement on earth is not controlled by God. God is omnipresent. He is everywhere. But he does not control the destiny of every individual. I believe there is individual destiny. Otherwise, we're just robots. And I don't believe that I'm a robot. Do you believe you're a robot? You believe you have no individual control over your life? You believe God is moving your every breath? Well, leave me out of that one. But what do you think? Steve in New York, let's begin with you on WOR in this day of tragedy. How do you see this today?
Well, I'll tell you, it strengthens my faith because I see what happens to those who have no hope. And this is the problem in this country. You know,
wait, hold on. You mean wait, stop it. You mean everyone shot in the theater was guilty of having no hope?
No, I'm talking about the person who fired the shots. You know, my faith in God is based upon the hope that no matter what happens to me, even if I die, I will be with him. And you know what? I believe he is omnipotent and omnipresent, and we have to remember that our lives are but a flicker in the space of eternity.
Forget the flicker, if you don't mind. I haven't seen my life as a flicker. I've seen my life as a very intense and not a flicker. But I know about geological time. My friend, you can't say God wanted to shoot these children in the theater. You're not alleging that, are you?
Absolutely not. What I will say, though, is God...
Wait, hold it then. You just said that you believe God is omnipotent. So that means that God wanted every child who was killed and injured to be in that theater and to get maimed, right, or killed?
No, absolutely not. But to say that an omnipotent God doesn't know what the end of history from the beginning, he does know. And quite honestly, and I base this on the Bible, we pay the price for our sins. And that's what's going on. And
so, in other words, these children who went to a movie on a Friday night were sinning because they were in a movie theater at midnight, and they deserve to get shot. It doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, it doesn't fly with me. It doesn't fly with me. I'm sorry. Who do you blame the most is the question. I certainly think there's a lot of blame here for the movie industry. I mean, what are you, crazy? You're going to let them double talk you that there's no relationship between watching a violent movie and violence that occurs soon thereafter? I'm not buying that. To me, it's Ratzenberg, Schmatzenberg, whoever did this movie. That complex of the moguls, the new czars of America, the ones who gave us Obama. Now, speaking of Obama, truthfully, he gave a very polite speech. I guess it's all a president could do. I thought Romney's reaction was more spiritually moving, and we'll play both of those for you. But truthfully, in my heart of hearts, I believe the president should have called Warner Brothers and said, we're pulling the movie temporarily until we get on top of this. And Warner Brothers should have complied. But you know they can't do it because they put him in office. That's all. He's like an actor on Warner Brothers stage. Obama is like an actor on Warner Brothers stage. You're going to have an actor tell a producer what to do? So that's why you're not going to get that kind of a response from government. What are you going to do here? There's plenty of blame to go around. At the end of the day, the kids are dead, maimed, wounded for life. The other ones are going to be frightened for the rest of their lives. And the only people who are not going to ever answer for this crime are the violence dealers, the violence peddlers. Those who I have said have created the sewer pipe that runs out of Hollywood into everyone's brain. I'll be right back.
Savage.
Okay, the gunman was very heavily armed. I am a gun owner. I have supported the NRA, but let me tell you something. And whether you like me after this or not, I really don't care. Common sense would dictate that there should not be drum magazines for sale to the public. Period. End of story. Why was this idiot allowed to go buy a drum magazine for a 223 rifle, an AR-15 convert? I don't know what the AR-15 was. I once owned an AR-15, but they became illegal in California with a certain stock. I got rid of it. I own a Ruger Mini 14, which shoots a 223. They're wonderful weapons, but I don't have a drum magazine. What do I need a drum magazine for? Where in the world is it written that an average citizen should be able to buy a drum magazine that holds 100 rounds of ammunition? That is a military drum. It's for military use only. Now, I know many of you say, oh, in case the government, we're going to fight the government. Please, I don't want to hear that anymore. I want to talk about rationality here. Why was this jerk allowed to go buy a drum magazine for a 223? Can anyone justify that? Take me on this. I don't care what you write on your blogs about me after this. It makes no difference. I'm used to being misunderstood or attacked by everybody, so it doesn't matter to me. I may as well just speak my mind as I do every day. Yeah, I mean, the corn is real high right now in my life. The corn is real high. And so at this point near harvest, I don't give a damn what you think about me. I am telling you that man had no right, and the country has no right, rather, to permit any single individual, not a member of police force, to buy a drum magazine. What in the world is this all about? That's what I have to say. What do you have to say? And, of course, the film producers are hiding right now. They're probably hiding on their yachts in Nice. Where are they today? Why aren't they apologizing? Because they don't want liability. If I were a shyster lawyer from Columbia or NYU, you can bet that if I was a shyster lawyer from NYU or Columbia or one of the other denizens of villainous lawyers, I would be suing the movie company for putting out this pollution because it triggered this kid. His hair was dyed like a character, the Joker. He was dressed like the Joker. He was playing a part of the movie. They absolutely could tie it to the movie. What, are you crazy? You can't see the connection? How blind can you be? Andrea in Sacramento. Andre, you don't agree the producers have anything to do with it. Okay, let's hear your point of view.
Hey, Mike, I'm like you. I'm a libertarian, conservative gun owner, but the reason why I say the producers can be blamed is that I look at it the same way as people who make soda or fast food, and really people have to choose what they watch, what they eat. And if we start saying, well, you can't produce this, how's it different than Bloomberg saying, you can't have a 16-ounce soda? I mean, at the end of the day, I come from former Soviet Union. Believe me, I'm not for the government trying to tell me what to do. But
so your fear is the First Amendment. You want absolute freedom of choice. It's a very good point. It's certainly something to be concerned about with an overbearing government. In other words, where does censorship end once it begins? On the other hand, don't you think that the violence in the theaters is triggering violence in susceptible individuals?
Absolutely. I agree with you. I dislike the Hollywood lefty trash just as much as anyone else.
Andre, look, when I was a kid, as I'm going to repeat again, the movies always showed gangsters dying in the end or going to jail. They never showed them walking around with gold chains and bling on their teeth, living on a yacht in the Mediterranean after they killed people.
Absolutely.
They were not heroes. They were shown as vermin. The criminal was shown as vermin in the movie theaters. As a kid, my heroes were soldiers, heroic soldiers. There were heroic doctors as heroes. For God's sakes, they made movies that had a kid come out wanting to be a doctor or a soldier or an airman, somebody who loved America.
I agree, and that's why we need to just, we need to stop watching these movies. That's how we're going to hit them in the back pocket.
Okay, well, that's a sore point for me because I'm a fanatic movie watcher. I watch 2-3 movies a night. Some of them I'll turn off if they're vile. If they're egregiously violent, I don't watch them. If they're egregiously sexual, I turn it off because I don't need it. The point is, if it's part of the story, okay. But I believe that the violence in the movies is inherently related to the reaction of some susceptible individuals. To use the phrase of liberals, to the most vulnerable amongst us. They're always talking about the most vulnerable and how the most vulnerable in our society need to be helped with welfare or this fare, that fare, my fare, your fare, his fare. Everyone is fair game to the bureaucrat. Well, the vulnerable individuals who are mentally weak, who, whatever the reason, I don't know the idiot's justification. He was studying neurosciences. There was a report that he was dropping out of the PhD program. That's a justification to go kill people because you couldn't make it in a PhD program? That's crazy. Believe me, a PhD program in a real university is probably one of the toughest things you can go through. I did it. I earned my PhD in 2.3 years, 2.5 years. One of the world records at University of California at Berkeley. And I'm very proud of it. But there were days I almost cracked from it. There were days I almost snapped that a wife and 2 children, affirmative action was working against me. But I don't want to go into my point. The thing is the PhD program is probably one of the most difficult programs in the world if it's in a real science, as opposed to if it's not in ethnic studies, for example, or something along those lines, one of those fake PhDs, or a governmental agency PhD. You get it in a real science. The kid was studying neurosciences today. Who studies neurosciences? Who knows? Did he have some neurological problems as a child that he was interested in deciphering or elucidating for himself? Was he on medication? I don't know. I don't care. He's a cold-hearted mass murderer. He should be executed. Okay? And the violence in the movies has to be stopped. That's it. Blame Hollywood. Blame the government. You could argue that if there was a conceal and carry law in place or an open carry law in place in Colorado and there was a couple of guys in the theater with guns, they would have killed him. After he started shooting, they would have gotten down and protected themselves and their family and killed him. But they didn't have the ability to do that. See, it's not saying get rid of guns. I mean, I am an individual who's feared this my entire life. I walk around not knowing if this could happen to me. I have feared it in houses of worship ever since the Islamic uprisings around the world, going back to the bombings in Beirut and the Marine barracks. Do you know that? Going back to the bombings of the barracks, the Marine barracks, every time I've entered a house of worship, I have legally been armed to protect my family because I always feared that some lunatic would come in and there would be like sheep sitting in the pews or sitting in the seats. And I said, I'm not going down without a fight. I'll do what I have to do to defend my kids. So, you could argue that as well. Terrible situation, but it makes all of this stuff come flying up to the surface, Now, I know many of you are absolutists on the Second Amendment and absolutists on the First Amendment. You're going to argue with me that you can't ban the drum mags because who knows, tomorrow they may not let us buy tanks. After all, everyone should be able to own a T-38. I mean, there's not a T-38 or a T-32 Soviet-era tank. Why shouldn't we be able to buy one of those? You could argue that any man in America who loves his family and is a red-blooded American should own a T-38. Because the American military has an M1. It's not as good as an M1. Let us buy a T-38 tank. I'd like one for my farm property. I'd like to go buy groceries in a T-38. What fun that would be. Huh? And I think about road rage. I mean, the guy's going to cut you off in a Lexus if you have a T-38. So where's this going to end now? I know it's coming. You can't ban the movies. You can't ban the drum magazines. Ratzenberg, and Spielberg are not responsible. Let them put out more vile garbage. Let them next show snuff movies. Let them show killing infants now. Let Katzenberg, and Matzenberg produce movies showing people eating babies. Show cannibalism. What's the difference? Don't ban anything. Because we have such a stable nation. The children are all so stable in our country. They're rock solid stable. After all, none of them are on medication. None of the hothouse kids are on medication. Now, you want to make this racial? How about this? How's this for a curveball coming from the savage nation? I've noticed something interesting. It's something bizarre. Have you noticed that whenever there is some kind of mass shooting, mass murder, it's always a white kid? It's a white kid? How do you explain that? Because this is an interesting sociological question, by the way. And I think it's something that is worthy of a discussion, probably not by us. This is something that a PhD student could do if they were unbiased. You know that they're biased, so they're going to always say because white men are inherently more violent. It's not the answer. There's something about the culture that triggers Caucasian males when they go nuts to be the mass shooters, the mass murderers. Now, it's not 100% true. I remember back in the 80s, there was a Long Island Railroad shooting of Colin Ferguson. I have a pretty good memory. The corn may be high in my life at this time, but I can remember names and incidents. That's the one incident that's sort of the anomaly or the exception. the African-American male, Colin Ferguson, who blasted everyone by the way of any race, as did this kid, by the way. I don't think in the dark theater he singled out people of other races, so don't get me wrong on that one. He was a mass murderer, this one, and crazy, and probably on medication, which you're not going to learn because the pharmaceutical medical complex is so powerful, they're going to keep that hidden. Talking about this, I'm asking another question now. Why has the Fort Hood massacre suspect, the Muslim major Nidal Hassan, not been brought to trial? Why is Obama and the military and the FBI, why are they hiding him from the public? This happened several years ago. Why has there been no justice in the Fort Hood massacre? You're talking about a massacre? Again, there's another example of a mass shooting by not by a white male. Now we have two exceptions. So it could be that I just pulled your leg to get your attention. I'll be right back.
Savage.
So look, let's pull back. The Midnight Movie Massacre is a national tragedy. We can all pick someone or some entity to blame. I have my pet villains, the movie producers for producing violence, the drug manufacturers for peddling the overuse and overprescription of antidepressants, which often result in violent reactions, not necessarily as violent as this, but there's an awful lot of scientific evidence that the violence follows the use of antidepressants. It's pushed down and it's under the surface, but everyone in the medical profession who studies these things knows the evidence exists. You can also say, why are they permitting the sale of drum magazines? You can also ask, why are they permitting the sale of body armor? I don't understand that one, do you? Why should a citizen need body armor unless they're preparing to go to war against the police or the military? I mean, at a certain point, it becomes insanity here. Howard on WFTL in Florida, what do you think about the body armor situation?
Absolutely, Doctor. If I was carrying my 380 in the theater and this guy came along, how would I protect myself? Where'd he get the full body armor to cover his throat, his chest, the upper legs, the groin area, the lower legs? He had the helmet, that special helmet. Where'd he get all this?
I don't know. Maybe he bought it in military surplus.
Well,
why is it
that
for?
Should be outlawed.
Well, all right, I agree with you. Why should an average citizen have better protection than a cop?
Absolutely.
Do you remember that incident a number of years ago in Los Angeles where they had full body armor and automatic weapons and they were shooting cops like 10 pins? Remember that incident?
Absolutely.
The cops had handguns and they had automatic weapons and they had full body armor. They had impunity. They needed to bring in an armored personnel carrier to put the guys down.
I don't know how this is being sold. I don't know.
Well,
understand.
This is the problem. It's the creeping, crawling. Don't take away a piece of my Second Amendment because then you'll take away all of it. Don't take away a piece of my First Amendment because then you'll take away all of it. I want to make a very important point for my listeners. There's no such thing as absolute freedom because absolute freedom is anarchy. And we have anarchy in this country right now. We have government anarchy, number one. We particularly have government anarchy. They're out of control. We know that. But there's anarchy. Anarchy seems to be raging in this country right now. Mark my words. Mark my words. As Rahm Emanuel infamously said, never let a crisis, right? Never let a crisis go unused. They have used every crisis the way pig slaughterhouses once boasted that they sold every part of the pig except the squeal. The Obama White House will exploit this crisis to the nth degree on every possible level. Make no mistake about it. It's coming in the next few days. They're working on it right now. They're getting together. Axelrod, Obama's brain, Axelrod, who's a very bright man, is working overtime to figure out how to use this against Republicans and Romney without alienating the blue-collar white male who owns a gun, who they're now trying to make believe is their friend, until the election. So there's a very political potential, which is people are disturbed by this as they should be. Could have been them, could have been their kids. Here's one side story. Survivor of June Mall shooting killed in Colorado theater. Here's a young girl in her 20s who was in Toronto, in a Toronto mall last month, and she escaped that deadly shooting. She was among the 12 massacred at the Denver area movie theater where Batman The Dark Knight Rises was playing early Friday. Jessica Gowie, she was killed. So, I mean, this is insanity. The whole thing's crazy. The whole thing is crazy. Hollywood is the number one target today. Much too much violence. Let's start with my premise. The violence in the films is the number one epidemic in America. It has to be curtailed. Do you agree with me or disagree with me? As I said to you, there's a lot of targets. There's a lot of potential blame to go around. But the number one issue is Hollywood. That's my opinion. And as I say to you, I am in the media. I live on the First Amendment. I live on the thin line. I walk on a razor's edge. Hollywood hates me. I've been told personally that the very individuals that I constantly attack on this show, the true moguls of the entertainment business, have a vendetta against Michael Savage. They work around the clock trying to destroy my radio career. I've heard this. I've heard it. I've heard people who've been at the meetings. They've leaked it to me. I'm never going to ever divulge who sat in meetings with some of those people have heard that they've tried to destroy me because they know I'm the last independent voice willing to stand up to the Hollywood moguls. They control everything that you hear, see, read, and write in this country. They think, but they don't. They actually don't. They would like to. Yes, Hollywood they control. Yes, movies do not get made in their town unless it passes the violence, the level of violence or pornographic imagery that they require in order to satisfy their togas. They're like czars. They're the new Caesars of America, and they answer to nobody. In fact, they created the presidency. I told you that before. You don't want to believe me. I was told months before Obama was even known that fundraisers were being conducted in Beverly Hills, California. I know from insiders at certain homes for this senator from Illinois named Barack Obama, and they made him president. They made him president. So when Barack Obama got up today, and he gave a very polite, technocratic speech about the tragedy, notice he didn't blame Hollywood, but nor did Mitt Romney. Notice Mitt Romney steered clear of blame. But I would give Mitt a higher rating because he talked about God, while Obama ignored God because, you know, pretty much why. Who do you want to blame here? Hollywood, video games, the comic strip Batman, the gun manufacturers who make magazine rounds like this, the drum rounds, body armor. I mean, why was he allowed to buy body armor, for God's sakes? Let's see who you blame. Let us see who you blame. Who is, in your opinion, who is the most to blame? Let's be clear. Look, I'm not the only one thinking about it. The first thing you think when you hear a thing, what's the first thing that went in your mind when you read this morning? It was, oh, my God, those poor kids. Number two, who did it? The first thing is the kids, in my mind. Second, who did it? It's human curiosity. You want to see the shooter. You want to know his name. You want to know his ethnicity. You know that, and I know that. You know, let's strip the cover off the human emotion here. Everyone wanted to know, was it terrorist related? Right? That's the first thing on your mind. Right? So now, what's the third thing? Now you start thinking, well, who's to blame here? Because how do we stop this from happening? Hollywood violence, overprescription of antidepressants. Those are the two places to begin. 1-800-449-8255, michaelsavage.com. Let me fire away at a few calls here because there's an awful lot of calls. Drew in Naples, Florida. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Savage, one only needs to go back a few decades to see the powerful influence that entertainment media has when Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds. People killed themselves that day, even with the disclaimers. It's a powerful medium. It sways and influences people.
Oh, right. When he made the movie War of the Worlds, that's right. I heard about it. I wasn't born yet. Where he said where the Earth, America's being, no, sorry, the Earth is being invaded by men from outer space. Please stay in your houses. People committed suicide.
That's correct. It was a radio broadcast that he did, and it was back in the day when they did disclaimers at the beginning, but some people might have missed it, and they thought it was real, and people were killing themselves, jumping out of windows. They were going crazy, and he was almost run out of Hollywood, but of course they said, you know, you can't do this. This was just a terrible mistake, blah, blah, blah. I made a disclaimer, and Hollywood is culpable because they plant these ideas constantly. They program the brain with these images.
100% right. That's absolutely right. It goes down to the sexuality that they're promoting. 100% right.
The
Anti-family, anti-American, anti-flag, anti-cop, you name it. Everything decent in America is the target of the vermin of Hollywood.
Exactly. They've disconnected us from our morality and from our God, and they
absolutely. They hate God. They hate mom and apple pie. They hate mother and father. They hate the idea of a nuclear family. They hate the church. They hate the priest. They hate the cop. You name it. Every one of those statements I just made is 1,000% true. And the reason I'm able to say it is because the corn is high in my life. The corn is very high in my life, and I have to now, I've never really held back what I believe. But look, my friends, you know what I'm saying? It's just the way it is. Thank you for the call. Very, 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 very tragic day. And everyone listening to this program is dying to get on the air and express something. And this is actually the genius and benefit of talk radio. You have to talk it out of yourself. You have to call talk shows like mine. You'll be calling over the weekend. You'll be calling Monday morning. You'll be calling through the middle of next week until the next, news cycle. And you're going to see, by the way, by Monday, what Obama's team does with this tragedy and this crisis and how they use it. They will use it the way the pork producers used everything of the pig except the squeal. However, in this case, I believe that Mr. Axelrod will even find a way to use the squeal to somehow advance the agenda of the Democrat Socialist Party USA. This is the savage nation. It's not a happy day. It's a very tragic day. It's a day that people have to just withdraw, hug their children, go to God. There's nothing else you can do. There's nowhere else to turn at the end of the day. You have to pray. You have to pray, pray, pray. And you have to make certain that your gun is oiled and loaded and ready to be used if it's legal. Carry it with you if it's legal. That's all I can tell you. Carry it with you. You may need it in the movie theater if it's legal to do so.
Savage.
We don't know what drugs this guy was on, but as sure as I'm standing here, it's very, very similar to the Columbine shooting. And it took months for people to confirm what I suspected, which is that they were on SSRIs, which is, as you know, those are medications that are known as agonists at the dopamine receptor site. In plain layman's terms, it's an antidepressant that prevents dopamine from diminishing in the serum, and it gives you a good feeling. That's an antidepressant. However, for everything there is a payment. Whatever goes up must come down. And I've long felt that antidepressants, you have to pay the piper. They keep you up, and all of your negative feelings are pushed down. So you pop more of the pill, up, push it away. All the aggression, all of the feelings that you would normally excise from your being in other ways, pushed into your subconscious, explosion. Violence, self-violence, homicide, suicide. So that, to me, is something that has to be looked at, which is the over-medication of individuals with SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, is what they used to be known as. Well, things just got uglier and crazier. You're going to hear something you've heard nowhere else today. It's shocking. It just came out. I don't know if it's valid. It's from TMZ. Cops investigating sex site profile of the shooter, James Holmes. Cops investigating sex site profile of James Holmes from TMZ. A man claiming to be James Holmes, that's the shooter, that's his name anyway, created a profile on a popular sex website just days before the Dark Knight Rises massacre, in which he described his private parts in a certain way. And investigators are now looking at the site to determine its authenticity. Listen to this. First of all, it included a picture of himself with reddish-orange hair, just as officials in Aurora, Colorado said he looked when he was apprehended Friday morning. He included a cryptic message on the sex site, which reads, "Will you visit me in prison?" In his profile, Holmes says he's 6'0" and single with an athletic body. The FBI says Holmes is 6'3". He describes himself as a light social drinker, but in the section where he's asked if he smokes or does drugs, he answered, "I prefer not to say." Sexual orientation, he says straight. Looking for women, couples, man and woman, groups or couples, to women, for erotic chat or email, discrete relationship, one-on-one sex or group sex, 3 or more. We don't know if this is him, but it certainly looks like him. He describes himself in a very sexual manner. Says he's looking for a fling or casual sex. Nice guy. And according to the website, Holmes last logged into the site sometime in the last 3 days. Photos, again, shows him posing wearing headphones with red hair. We don't know whether this is true, but if the profile is that of the shooter, it could be relevant in the investigation. In other words, he's an all-around crazy POS. And no doubt he was drugged up. And no doubt there's a relationship to the violence in the movie. And no doubt he shouldn't have been sold a magazine, a drum magazine for his assault rifle, etc., and so forth and so on. It'll go on and on and on. He's crazy. He's no good. He's evil. But this just came out. I thought that I should read it to you. It was sent to me by a friend in the media. Take it for what it is. It's all emerging. So, Pittsburgh, PA, welcome to the Savage Nation. Go ahead, please.
Michael, you can blame it on violent movies. You can blame it on drum magazines, or that he didn't get a puppy when he was 5 years old. I blame it on the guy that pulled the trigger. I mean, there's 313 million people in the United States, and last night one lunatic shot up a bunch of people. There's no way.
Right, well, that's ultimately you are. I mean, ultimately, I agree with you. You are correct. Ultimately, it's the lunatic, evil man who did this. However, there are influences upon the evil lunatic. Who would you blame? Andrew in New York, go ahead, please. Fire away. Make it 20 seconds or less.
Yes, Dr. Savage, appreciate your program. Thanks for coming on. As an ordained minister, I just wanted to give you that perspective that, no, we're not robots, but the presence of God, vis-a-vis, us praying, his children praying, can affect a human being to where they won't want to do something like that.
I agree with you. If there were 10 commandments on the walls of every school, which used to be there used to be a presence that said, thou shalt not kill. But the vermin at the ACLU ripped down every reference to the Big Ten across America. And now we're living with the jungle. We're now living in a jungle of amorality because of the rats in the ACLU and their friends in the government. I agree 100%. That's right. When I grew up, I mean, there were sayings the kids looked up to. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not do this. It gave you some guidelines. There's no red lights anymore. Now it's if it feels good, do it. Why not do it in the road? If it feels good, do it. You want to murder someone, it's a lifestyle choice. That's all. That's what the kid figured out already. Hey, you know what? I think I'll go out and murder somebody. What the heck? I'll be famous the next day. Well, for I know, Barbara Walters may have me on. Sean Hannity might have me on the show. I could tell him that it was God's will. Sean could give me a leading question. I could say, God made me do it. They'll be good for Sean's ratings. That's what you get with a wall banger. We don't know what might happen tomorrow. After all, he had Zimmerman on. He could have this shooter on. If it's good for ratings, it's good for Sean. So that's the world we live in. It's all crazy. There's no water filter that filters out lunacy.